Welcome to Generation H. Yeah, so today we are getting into seller financing. Whew, that's like the big target market for this coming up move, because I think that seller financing is going to be a huge way to get into a lot of these houses that you might not have been able to get into before, because sellers are now a little scared to sell. So now going into seller financing, when you can offer another tool out of your tool belt, might ease their way into selling you their property. So first, you need to find a motivated seller. So go to them and offer them a contract just like you normally would for selling. And when you negotiate with the seller, some sellers don't actually need cash. So you kind of really need to go in detail on why they're selling, what their financial position is, because a lot of sellers don't need cash. Or what if that seller makes $200,000 a year or $100,000 a year? If they sell this property, they might go into a $200,000 tax bracket, which now is going to kind of hurt them when you go into taxes. Have y'all ever done seller financing?
Yeah, well, what is seller financing first?
So seller financing, it's when the seller holds the note to the property. So basically, you get it under contract. Instead of you going to a hard money lender or a bank to say, hey, I need $100,000 to buy this, the seller's like, how about I write you a promissory note and a deed of trust, and I'll hold the $100,000 until you sell it, or we work out monthly payments or something like that.
And an attorney can draft those things for you. They can draft the promissory note. I mean, that's a pretty simple document, but promissory note and also record the deed. An attorney can get.
So you still have to go to closing just like you normally would if you're purchasing. You're just doing it a little differently, and you're giving that seller an option to make a little bit of interest on top of that, and you can really offer them a higher price, because now not only are you not having to pay holding costs for borrowing the money, they're holding the note, meaning you could either get the interest free, or you can say, hey, I'll offer you 5% interest if you hold the note for X amount of years or X amount of months, so you can renovate it and flip it, or you can renovate it and hold on to it long term.
And I think that's key, because a lot of people are still stuck in their mind about the 2021 pricing for what they saw on Zillow or whatever, or maybe an offer that they got before for what their price of their house was. And the market's changed a lot. And now everybody's factoring in concessions and price reductions and interest rates and everything. So what you're willing, as investors, what we're willing to pay is not top dollar anymore. It's a bit less than that. But you can still offer them top dollar by doing the seller financing, because you cut out a lot of middlemen.
Exactly.
You cut the banks out. You cut a lot of people out. And and it's a win-win for both.
Not only that, but you get to offer them more options, because some of my best deals were seller finance because the seller didn't need the cash, and they knew that if they sold it in November, they were going to have to pay taxes in April. So instead, we did a seller finance. We pushed it to February for me to renovate the whole house, and then I either refinanced them out after the 90-day marker, or I sold it on the market. And it kind of pushed them past the tax process, because that's the big thing for a lot of these sellers is either taxes, or they don't really know about seller financing. They don't know that they can be the bank. And for me as an investor, I can't wait to get into this point in my career where I can be the bank. And I'm going to probably seller finance most of my properties when I get older, and just take a less of a monthly payment, but now I don't have the hassle of the house.
For me, I'm probably going to do the same thing as you, where I start finance people, because it helps people get started, because they don't need to go to a bank to get a loan.
It does.
You obviously got to do your due diligence on the person if you're lending it out, seller financing to someone. How do you find it hard for sellers to understand the concept of seller financing when you're explaining it to them?
I do. I think what helped me is I went to a class on seller financing, and it helped me with a little bit of the verbiage to communicate with them. So when you're talking to them, you really need to know what you're talking about. Because if you go in there and you don't know what you're talking about, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to understand, and they're just going to be like, can you give me cash? Of course you can give them cash, because we all have hard money lenders and banks that will give us cash. But seller financing just holds a key for the seller to make more money, and for you to make, I'm not necessarily for us to make more money, but it just eliminates the challenge of going to a bank or a hard money lender and paying those holding costs, because You don't have to.
I have an example, and it's a pretty exaggerated one. I made 3 offers to a potential seller. One was an all-cash offer for $115.
Yep.
I made you fix a few things that need to be repaired, and then I'll buy it for a little bit more. I think it was like $125. And then I offered the seller financing option, which was $170.
Yes.
It's a big difference.
Yep.
It's a $45,000 difference from the next bottom, right? And they still didn't go with the seller finance, but they had that option.
Yeah.
And I feel like most people, especially ones that aren't financially savvy, they'll just be like,
cash.
I mean, ultimately that's the better deal in my opinion too, because we had a balloon and everything. They were going to get more than 125 at the end of the 5-year balloon, but he preferred the cash because he didn't have the tax implication. But some people having that all day.
It could push them into a 50% bracket if they're
Correct.
making 300 and the house sells for another 300. That'll put them into paying 50% on some of that money, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, so what really helped me learn is I had a seller that kind of educated me on seller financing, and he was pushing for it a little more than I was. And I kind of just asked him like why, and he was probably 68 years old, almost 70 years old, and he, for one, was on Social Security and all of that. He couldn't make but a certain amount of money anyways, or it would kick him off of Social Security and all of his benefits that he used to get from his work and all of that. So he explained all of that, and now I pay him $850 a month as my mortgage, and at a 4% interest rate. At the time, 4%, I was like, do I really want that? Now I'm happy I have a 4% rate. But, and he makes $854 a month, which equivalates to almost like 10 grand a year, versus him selling it, he would have made $140,000.
Yeah.
So 10 grand a year added to his Social Security doesn't even affect it at all. 140 puts him too high.
Yeah.
And we did a 10-year balloon, and in 10 years, he has the option to either extend it another 10 years, depending on his health and how he's doing and if he needs the cash, or I go and refinance him and hope that the interest rates aren't 7% like they are now.
Yeah, and balloon, I've used it and you've used it. It's basically the end of the term or the end of your timeline.
Yes.
And at that point, the loan has to be paid in full or renegotiated at that point.
And if you look at it like that, everyone has a balloon. You go get a 30-year fixed mortgage, your balloon is 30 years.
Yeah.
Regardless of how you look at it, 5, 10, 15, 30.
Yeah, the balloon is usually used in a term of like
all
shorter.
the payments.
Yeah, all the payments are done because at 30 year it expires and you're at 0. But the balloon would be more in like 5 years, 10 years, and there's still a loan due and you have to pay that out in full. Right?
And if you're first time learning about seller finance, always shoot for a 30-year amortization, because if you do a 30-year amortization, no, it's not going to be paid off in 10 years, but now your payment is tremendously lower than if you did a 10-year amortization on a 10-year loan.
Or you can do interest only too, right?
And you could do interest only. Yeah, I've done that before as well, to where you just give them interest only and that principal amount just stays exactly the same.
Yeah.
Which, as long as it's a good deal and you have a good game plan for the end, not a bad play.
Yeah.
And that's what's cool about seller finance. It's very flexible because it's just another person on the other end. You could do the interest only. You could do 40-year amortization, 50-year amortization if you wanted to.
Yeah.
You could do balloon payments at any part of the loan.
No interest. I have one that I have now, and they weren't even interested in interest payments. We basically worked it out to where I pay it's like $700 a month, and the house was $120,000, and we did it over the exact amount of months. So I paid literally no interest, and the seller was cool with that because I explained everything to him. And when we got to the end, he never mentioned anything about interest, and neither did I. So I was like, all right, well, let's just ride this thing out. And he was happy, I was happy, and now hopefully he doesn't listen to this and know that we didn't do any interest, and he could have got interest, but he didn't ever say anything. And you can kind of educate them on that. And if they do want 5% interest, right now at 7% interest rates, you're going to get a better deal at a 5% seller finance rate.
Yeah.
Now, typically, if they do bring up interest rates, they're going to want higher than what the bank is getting most of the time, right? Do you see that?
I would say no.
Really?
Yeah, because most of the ones that I've done are right in line with what it is. Yeah, they want probably equal to or similar to.
Okay.
Yeah. And another big question is, what if they have a mortgage? Seller financing only works if they're paid off. So if they have a mortgage, it's still seller financing, but now it's considered a subject to, because now you can, one, take over that mortgage. You can kind of go different routes. You can put a down payment down to pay off that mortgage and then work the equity with the seller. You have options. There's not just a cash price and that's it. You get a little more options. Have you ever done sub 2 or something like that?
No. I've tried to put my foot in the door on a couple of them.
Yeah.
But it hasn't materialized yet.
Yeah.
So with subject to, though, you are liable for their payments. So if you do not make those payments, it does screw over the seller's
Correct.
credit.
And they have to trust you to do this. And so I've gotten into a couple of them when I first started to where they said they were going to make the payment. Luckily, I was flipping the house, so it didn't affect me, but they didn't make a single payment. I gave them the money, and they turned around and kept it and didn't put it towards the mortgage at all. It was $1,000 a month mortgage, and they were like, this is $1,000 in my pocket. Shame on me for not doing my due diligence and paying the mortgage for them. When I pick those deals up, I get all their banking information to the mortgage company, and I stroke that check, or I do the debit straight from my account. So that way I don't get
directly to the mortgage company.
Directly to the mortgage company. They're not involved at all unless there's extra on top of that. Then they get that little check and not the whole check.
Yeah.
So I learned my lesson early on, and I'm glad I didn't keep that as a long term, because it would have got foreclosed on, and I would have been screwed with all the work I did to it. So yeah.
And the reason people might want to subject to their house to let's say Daryl is because their house, they have a loan on their house for $200 and it's only worth like $195. And since they got a 3% interest rate, Daryl's willing to just take over that 3% interest rate, even though he's paying a little bit more for the house, for the balance that's left on the house. So the seller, in order to get rid of their house, they would have to go through Daryl unless they want to come to closing with cash, because you got to pay realtor fees, pay all the extra fees.
So instead, Daryl's going to give them $15,000 to make up that difference.
Correct.
And then just make a monthly payment.
And then make a monthly payment.
Could.
Yeah. Or you give them nothing. He give them nothing.
You could.
Yeah. So one of the best deals that I flipped or did, they had $100,000 left, and the house probably needed $60,000 in work, but at the end of it would be worth $240,000, $250,000. And I ended up giving them $10,000 just cash to walk away, because could they have put it on the market and maybe got that? Maybe, but they would have run the risk of inspections, appraisals, all of that, and they weren't ready to take that risk. So they're like, oh, please take this mortgage. It was like 3.89 or something, and I took it over and I made the payments for like 4 months while I was working on it. $10,000. They were happy. They wanted to come back and see the house when I was done. That was the only requirement, plus the $10,000. And when I was done with it, they were in tears after they saw the finished product. Luckily for me, and it was during last year, 2021, what did the market do? It skyrocketed. I ended up getting $280,000 for the house. So I blew it out the park, but it's one of those things that they were happy with that because they didn't think they were going to get anything. $10,000 for them was $100,000 to me. Like, it was everything that they could have ever asked for.
Yeah.
So, and that's just going into sub 2. I mean, sub 2 can get really complicated. Like, a lot of people think it's a lot of paperwork and it's scary. It's really not. You get the same contract under the same house under contract, the same contract you normally would fill out if you're buying cash. Only difference is you have to get a lawyer to either put it in a trust or close it to assume the loan. That's the only difference.
Yeah, I guess we can make another video on that, I think.
Yeah, that could be a whole separate
yeah.
You could go all into that side of it. But to go back to seller financing, I mean, seller financing is a huge tool to utilize, I think. Because now you just give them options. Like you said, you can offer more. You just give them that third play that they might not have thought about. And explain to them taxes. A lot of these sellers don't realize they got to pay taxes on those gains. And those taxes could hurt you. They could not be a big deal. It just depends on where you're at.
Yeah, because those taxes aren't being withheld when they cash their check.
Correct.
They have to withhold their taxes.
They withheld them. And then they get the bill at the end of the year. And most people don't understand that they have to owe taxes or have never paid taxes. Like us, we pay taxes every year, so it's no big deal. Someone that gets it taken out of their check every time, they're used to getting a check at the end of the year, not owing a check. So I would say utilize seller financing as much as you can. At least offer it. The worst they can say is no. I'll take cash.
Okay.
Okay.
So, do you want to do a role play?
Alright, are you selling me?
Yeah,
I'm selling my
He's
house.
trying
Okay, you're selling your house. Okay,
All right, so
gotcha.
we're gonna do a role play
Yes.
on seller financing. So
Yeah.
again, seller financing is Daryl here is
Yep.
trying to buy the house from Dylan,
Yes.
but he's gonna propose a seller financing option.
Yep.
Dylan has a house. He doesn't know what seller financing is and how it could benefit
Yeah.
him because of his tax bracket or whatever. So,
Okay. So
we
just
have
to
a-
give you a little background before we get into that, how much is your house worth? What are you selling it? Or how about this? What are you selling the house for? And how much
Alright.
do you make per year? Because I'm probably already going to know these things going into it.
I'm trying to sell the house for. I'm a tired landlord. I don't like the house
Okay.
anymore. Don't like the
Alright,
tenants.
Even better.
I own it all cash. It's an all cash house, and it's worth about 150. That's what I want, about 150.
You want 150.
I want 150.
tenants are still in it.
Tenants, sure, tenants are still in it.
Okay. Tenants are still in it. What
what
are
are
they
they
paying?
They're paying. I haven't raised the rents in a while, so they're paying $700.
God.
700 a month. Okay.
Oh, God.
But you
Okay.
can get $1,200. if you
Uh,
raise the rent.
Yeah.
1,500.
Yeah. How long have they been there? And when was the last time you renovated, or how much work does the property need? Because I'm going to know all this before I even introduce seller financing.
Not much work.
Doesn't need much work.
Doesn't need
Right.
much work.
Ready to
Of
go.
Yeah.
course
Okay.
it doesn't.
You know.
Okay. All right. So.
Get your
All the
bathroom
bathroom and everything.
paint.
All right, so Dylan, now I know you need 150. Really, my cash price is probably going to be 120, but I can get to your 150 range if we do some type of creative financing. Like, are you open to something other than just straight cash?
Creative financing. I've never heard that before. What
So
do you mean?
creative financing is more like, instead of me giving you cash, I'm going to work your cash
I'm gonna give you
in
Monopoly
over
money.
time.
You're gonna
Yeah.
give me cash over time.
Yeah, so basically, instead of you collecting $750 a month in rent, now we're gonna down that to about $300 a month in rent. So you're gonna make $300, and instead of rent, it's gonna be a mortgage. So you get the opportunity to be a bank.
So I don't have to manage the tenants. I just collect my
None.
300 from
You're
you.
tired of these tenants anyways. Why would you want to still manage them?
Okay, and who owns the property? Or
So
you-
I would own the property, and you
Okay.
would hold the note on the property. So just like Wells Fargo held the note for you for the last 20 years while you used them
yeah.
for your mortgage, now you hold the note. Now you are Wells Fargo.
And so since it's going to be your, what if you don't pay me? What if I don't get my $300 from you?
So if I don't pay you, you get to foreclose on me, just like Wells Fargo would have foreclosed on you 10 years ago when you decided you didn't want to pay them either.
Okay, and then I just get the if foreclosure. Does that mean I just get the house back?
So
or
basically, you go through foreclosure. It goes through a 90-day. If I don't pay you for 90 days, then you turn around and you file for a foreclosure. It comes in, and you can actually take the house back over if you'd like.
something? Okay, so what's your offer with doing it that way?
So doing it like that, I think I'm going to come in around 145. So I'm still not at your 150 marker, but I'm not at 120 like my cash offer. I can offer you about 25,000 more because you're doing it on terms, and I'm even okay with putting 10% down. So I'll give you 12. I'll give you 14,000 down payment, and then I'll want to finance the remaining 126 or 129,000.
For $300 a month until
Yes.
that whole loan
And
is
then
paid off?
Term wise, that part's up to you. We can run it for a 5-year balloon, and then you can decide whether you want to extend it for another 5, or if you're okay, I'd prefer to do 10 years.
10 years. So you pay me $300
A
for
month for 10 years.
10 years.
Yep.
And then you pay me the full 126 after that 10 years, or
And then no, so then I would get principal pay down,
Oh.
and then if you would like, I can put some interest on there as well. So then that way, it's not just 100% $300 going towards principal,
oh, okay.
unless you want like 3%, 4% interest rate. I'd be okay with doing that.
Okay, so I can make some.
So
I
now
can get
you're
a higher
making
price
extra.
and make interest,
Correct.
and
And you're on a 30-year amortization, so a lot of my payment isn't going to principal anyways, it's going to interest, just like you paid when you bought the house.
oh, okay.
Yeah, so you know how so if you look at your amortization
Yeah.
schedule, you can go down, and on month 60, the total, instead of it being 129, is only going to be about 125 and some change.
Yeah.
So out of 5 years, I've only paid down 4,000 of the principal, and the rest went in your pocket.
Okay, so you have one of your offers is 125 all cash, and then one of your offers.
120 all cash, and then 145 would be my seller financing offer, to where you hold the note on the property.
And then I will get all if I do
And
it for the
10% down payment
Okay.
as well, with about a $300.
and eventually I'll get that over the 10 year. Eventually on that 10th year I'll be at least at 145. I'll make more than 145.
You'll make more than, you'll
because
make
of interest.
155,000,
Oh, okay.
if not more. Yeah, I mean, didn't do the math in front of me, but if we sit down and do the exact math, I can show you what's going to principal and what's going to interest every single month for the next 10 years.
Okay, well, I think I'll have to I have to talk to my wife. But, I think the 145 sounds a lot better to me.
And typically, the 145 is going to sound better because it's really not 145. When we break this all down in front of your wife, it's going to be 160 or 155. So it's even going to be more than you were expecting.
Yeah, I think she'd
To
like
make.
that. Yeah.
So
All
it
right.
all really just comes down to whether or not you need money now, or if you're okay with making more later.
Yeah, because if I get that money, I don't know what to do with it anyway. If I get the 120
Yeah.
from you and
And-
just sell it all cash, I don't know what to do with it.
I mean, how many properties have you sold this year?
I sold. This would be my third.
Haha, so your taxes are going to be through the roof.
Oh, they are?
Oh yeah, you're going to pay capital gains tax because you haven't lived there in 2 years.
But don't I have to pay capital gains tax doing it your way too?
So you do, but only on $3,600 a year.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'll save a lot of money that way.
Per year you will. Now, of course, in 10 years, when you get the lump sum, you're still going to pay. But hopefully, that's the only house you sold that year. Because if you only sell one house this way for the next 10 years, at least you limit it to only $120,000 in capital gains tax versus your whole 150 plus the 150 from the last two.
Yeah, so I save more money.
Correct.
I get more, or I save more money on taxes.
Do you like paying Uncle Sam?
I do not like paying Uncle Sam.
I didn't think so. So, yes.
So save more money on taxes. I get more money in the end because of the interest. And then I also get a higher offer up front with the 145.
Correct. Yeah. So it's 3 wins. The only one that's not a immediate win is you don't get all of the cash now.
Yeah, and
But
that's okay.
It's okay if A, B, and C are beneficial to you.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, I think I'm just gonna make the deal without my wife.
Now he gets $150 and his wife gets $150. End of the story.
Yeah, those are just some of the options. Like, that was 100% ran. I didn't plan for that at all. So $300 a month is probably not accurate, and I hope he's not getting $750 for $150,000. Because that would be horrible. At least you want to be in the 1%.
Yeah.
So the higher deals, that works out a little bit better and easier. Like the current one I have, I can kind of break that down if you want me to. So, like, one of my rentals, I bought it for $140, and my payment is $854 a month. It rents for $2,000 a month, so my spread is huge. And he was able to do it for a 10-year period on a 30-year amortization schedule. And I actually only put, I think I put $15,000 down on that deal. So I did put up a little bit more money. It was like $20,000 out of my pocket. But it worked out over the time.
In 1 year, you'll almost.
And
get
this
all
is
that
the
back.
guy who actually taught me a little bit more about seller financing because he only sells one house per year because of taxes. So all of his seller finance deals end on certain years, and he staggers them one after another. So every year he collects a big $120,000 check, but only one of them per year. And that pays all of his bills, expenses, everything. And my monthly income just goes right into all the rest of them that he has coming. Because all his life, that's all he's ever done as a real estate investor. And he's used to making 25, 30 grand a month off rental property income.
Yeah.
Now he gets to make $15,000 a month in rental income, not even have
big
any...
check.
And he has no liability. He has no responsibility for any tenants or anything, and he loves it.
Yeah.
So
how old is he?
He's like 68 now.
Oh.
Yeah, and I can't wait until I'm that age.
Yeah.
When I'm that age, I'm gonna kind of model my exit strategy after his.
That's a smart one.
Because his kids only want a couple of them, so he saved them for to keep for them. All the rest of them, he's just staggering them to end. And by the time he's 78 years old, all of them will be cashed out, but one after another.
Good for him.
Yeah, so it's another option to use in case you want to buy a house. You don't actually have to pay cash. And
Yeah.
not everybody wants cash. And I know y'all have heard this many times from other podcasts and seminars. Not everybody needs or wants cash.
Yeah,
And I didn't
it's more
understand
frequently
that.
than not
Yeah.
that like successful investors
Don't need cash.
have a cash problem. Like they have
Too
cash flow, they
Yeah.
have cash in their account, they're exiting a big successful negotiation, whatever.
But now that you've been in this long enough, would you rather have cash or cash flow?
I'm a cash flow guy.
Same.
So
I would rather
yeah.
have that cash flow than a lump sum of cash. I'd
Yeah.
rather have the $854 a month and do nothing. Just
Yeah.
hold a piece of paper that says you owe me this. And then if you don't owe me this, guess what? You just
Give
renovated
it
that
back.
house and give it right back
Yeah.
to me. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to do the same thing to somebody else.
Yeah,
And keep repeating the process.
yeah, yeah,
So I think everyone should use seller financing.
yeah.
At least
Okay.
once, or do research on it so you can at least start presenting it to sellers.
Yeah, it's not as intimidating. It
Worst
shouldn't
thing
be
they can
as-
say is
yeah,
no, and
is
guess
no.
what? I'm buying it for cash, just like I've bought hundreds of deals for. I mean,
Yeah,
that's-
and if anything, you've given them the option to make more money, but they
Yeah.
decide not to go for it. But you've also given them
Yep.
a second option. So it's not a yes or no. It's a B, or C
Yes.
type of
And all of the seller financing options that I've ever done, he was the only one that actually knew what seller financing was. All the rest of them had never heard of it, or didn't. Well, they had heard of it, but they didn't know what it was, and they didn't know that they could do that.
Yeah.
They didn't know they could be the bank and not have to go. They thought it was more hoops and you had to get attorneys and all this other stuff. You can get an attorney to draw up a promissory note and a deed of trust. Will the title company do it for you? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to go through all the hoops and hurdles just to get that done.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
and it's just as
Alright.
easy as closing. Closing is the same. Seller doesn't pay anything. So
Well,
yeah.
that's
Seller
seller
financing.
financing. So you want to get
Yes.
into real estate, and you don't have any. Well, I guess you need some money.
You
Sometimes.
need some money to
Sometimes.
make a down payment, or you need to be really good at negotiating.
Let's
Know
just
what
seller
you're talking
finance
about.
the whole thing.
Which
Yeah.
is doable too.
Yeah.
Some people will do that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't if I were a owner and seller
No,
financing.
want
I would
you-
at least
you
want
have some
10%,
skin. Yeah.
so
just
you don't
some
walk
skin.
away. Yeah.
But-
So
That's it.
sweet.
Carlos,
Generation.
Daryl, Dilly, Generation Urge. Subscribe,
Yes,
like,
please.
comment.
Yes, and if you want to
Share.
hear more, I mean, we can go farther into detail about sub 2, things like that. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
please like, comment. Nice.
Peace.